I know a lot of people love stories like this. This young man was married, and his wife, in principle, loved him, even very much, but after the birth of a child, his feelings began to fall. It seemed to him that his wife should support him in his career, because it is he who earns for the family. He was a programmer and needed hours of absolute peace, and his wife thought he should support her because the child was small. Then his mother-in-law moved in to help his wife. Mike started working in a cafe and not showing up at home because he didn't like his wife's mom. Her presence annoyed him, and the relationship between the couple became even worse. At the same time, Mike got another girl. Well, he liked a nice person, and he was able to spend time with her without a care in the world. Soon his wife found out and filed for divorce. Then Mike somehow persuaded his wife to reconcile. His wife's mother left, so that the young people to deal with themselves, and he began to help more in the household. But his wife liked to vindicatively repeat to him that she tolerates him only until the child is small, and then divorce. Mike all this and humiliated and saddened and made him angry. Periodically they fought almost every day, and from time to time Mike had the desire to take his wife and knock on something, and after such desires already appeared self-loathing and hours of complete apathy. He even started earning less, although he had been earning well before and was going to double his earnings soon. He would stay out for long periods of time. He would not hurry home, and when he came back in a bad mood, he would be rude to his wife. It seemed to him that she was killing him with the fact of his cheating. He had nothing to object and therefore was losing. He was thinking about what to do with this cheating, how to compensate for it, so that his wife would stop mentioning it, or, on the contrary, he should demand to shut up and not bother him with this fact. Since they decided to live together at least until the child is 3 years old. That is, he felt that it is quite normal to defend himself, but his wife uses prohibited methods and often wins. But he didn't see that all the way through he was attacking her. It did not come to fights yet, but Mike once broke his phone on the table, his hand too, hitting the wall, and his wife constantly warned that if he touched her finger, she would file for divorce. In the morning, when he left for work, Mike usually apologized, but in the afternoon everything started all over again. Mike thought that it was his shaken nerves and unsatisfied libido, but his wife did not want sex, especially after the scandals, which were almost every day, and it was a vicious circle. First of all, Mike had to admit that sex was not his territory, and he could not demand it. Even if he proved that he had the right, and he couldn't prove it, there was no way he could exercise that right. You can't rape your wife. You can't force her in any other way, and even if you could, Mike wouldn't want that. He would want reciprocity. You can't force reciprocity. This is simply a fact that every sexual navigator must come to terms with. Even if your spouse deprives you of the bare minimum, all you can do is walk away. You can't force him to do anything. Thinking hard, Mike came to the conclusion that even if he knew for sure that sex with his wife would never happen again in his life, he still would not want a divorce right now. He wanted to stay in the family for now. It was necessary for him to fulfill his fatherly duty. He not only brought money, he also helped in the household. And because he was not ready to change his life immediately, because he loved his wife and loved the child. That is, Mike first agreed that his wife had the right to never sleep with him again, and he had the right to divorce her, but now he didn't want to do that. At first, he kept questioning whether he should remind his wife about sex. What if she decides that he doesn't need anything either? Won't his cooling her down even more? After that, he learned to express sympathy to his wife without a sexual connotation, and that was enough. Yes, and Mike wouldn't have succeeded if he hadn't recognized his wife's right to refuse sex and stopped groveling and aggressively demanding it. That's what made him angry, mad, hate her, and hate himself. And not because of a high libido. As a result, gradually their sex life got better, and at some point Mike even wanted to subdue his wife's libido. He stopped coping with it. Unemployed wives want a lot of sex, more than their working husbands who are passionate about their careers. Although when Mike was worried about sex, he wanted it many times a day, and when he calmed down, he started needing it less often. His wife Meryl was a grade below him and had liked him since high school. She was dating a classmate of his, but he thought she was making eyes at everyone. After high school, Mike went to study, and when he happened to meet Meryl, who had just graduated, he noticed that she clearly didn't want to say goodbye to him, looking for new reasons to ask him something. But he was dating another girl at the time, but Meryl was so cute that he cheekily told her, "If you have any specific suggestions, call me," and gave her his phone number. Meryl called soon after and made a concrete offer to start dating. So brave. With Meryl, they were constantly arguing about all sorts of things, and soon he announced to her on the phone that he had no time to go out, and just sex was not what she needed. She didn't mind. That was the end of the close communication. A few years later, life pushed them together again. Mike had already had several affairs, one unhappy love and a couple of those where he felt like a fatal heartbreaker. They had met Meryl by chance, and he suddenly and unexpectedly realized that he had always loved her. He was overcome with such a piercing feeling. How beautiful she was! That's who I've always liked. Meryl herself was in an emotional high. Her eyes were shining. Mike confessed his love to her. She joked, but hinted that she loved him too. They went to Mike's apartment, then still rented, and made love. Mike had never had anything better with women. He was angry why he hadn't become her first man back then. But even now, everything was very beautiful, a lot of feelings. Meryl was a gentle, cheerful, affectionate girl. She gave in to Mike and happily welcomed all his initiatives. He perceived her as very obedient and very feminine. He felt much older and smarter. He was already earning well at that time. He had good prospects. Meryl's parents treated him well, so when it turned out that Meryl was late, Mike immediately proposed. They married, and the first few months of the pregnancy, despite the toxicosis, went beautifully. Mike was freelancing around the clock, earning money for an apartment. The whole pregnancy they had sex, and Meryl was the initiator herself, despite the fact that at the end of the pregnancy began their quarrels, and when the baby was born, suddenly for Mike found out that Mike, selfish. The first time he heard this was from his mother-in-law, who didn't live with them at the time, just came to help. It was said carelessly, of course he was selfish, all men are selfish. Mike was shocked. He thought he was a benefactor and a knight, working in the sweat of his brow, does not rest, does not think about leisure, abandoned his favorite games and even sports began to do 3 times a month, not 3 times a week as before. He was burning out at work, and suddenly he's selfish. He complained to Meryl about his mother-in-law, and she said nothing. He tried to have sex with her, and she pushed him away and said she was tired with the baby, and he wasn't helping her at all and was working too hard. His mother-in-law and father-in-law kept saying that Mike didn't have a proper job, and at any moment the family would be left without money. Mike soon found a job in a big company. He wanted to prove that he would get a good salary. But it didn't impress anyone. His wife still considered herself resentful, and sex became a chore for her. Then Mike blamed her mother for everything. Then he began to realize that he was in a merger with her and was projecting his feelings onto her, thinking that she should value what he valued. Mike's self-centered world began to crumble. He found out that what was wanted from him was not what he could give, but something else entirely. And he began to think that even if he got out of his skin, he would still be displeased. The main conflict from the beginning of the downfall of the relationship was sex. Mike wanted what was their back, and Meryl seemed to him to be manipulating it and tormenting him. She stopped enjoying it. She started saying it hurt. She blamed Mike for taking too long. She said she didn't feel anything. For him, sex was still as enjoyable and valuable as ever, despite the problems, but for Meryl it got nastier every time. Soon she was telling him she didn't want him. Then she was telling him she didn't love him. Mike felt humiliated, but he never once thought of leaving her alone. On the contrary, it seemed to him that this way he would humiliate himself more, humble himself, agree, give her the right to refuse him. So he literally forced her, demanded her, pestered her. Nothing good came out of it, but Mike did not know the way out. His wife became more and more grumpy. She constantly reproached him and scolded, and was dissatisfied with everything. Mike snapped at her and argued with her. Then he began to think that a divorce, it would be great, but now where to do the child? He began to disappear at work, and soon the mother-in-law moved in, who by that time already saw her son-in-law as an enemy. He did behave nastily. He could throw his fork in the sink because he was too lazy to get up and put it down. He criticized the food his mother-in-law cooked, and if he was given a baby to hold, he would soon tell her to take it away because he wasn't cut out for it. He was angry with Meryl, angry with his mother-in-law, angry even with his son, and at that time he no longer even demanded sex from his wife. He got himself a mistress, and for the first few days he was happy with his manly act. He stopped being humiliated, afraid, worried. He just enjoyed with a pretty girl and did not think what would happen next. He still worked a lot and gave his wife enough money, so he thought that he didn't owe anyone anything. He liked to be brutal and cynical, but everything suddenly ended one day. One day he came home from work and Meryl came out and told him with trembling lips that she was filing for divorce because she had read his correspondence with his mistress. Mike tried to excuse himself, but soon realized that this was serious and he was really losing his family. He started trying to talk, got a few slaps from his wife, and his mother-in-law poured a pot of water on him when he tried to keep his wife from leaving his apartment. Then the wife and child left. Mike called 100 times a day, negotiated with the mother-in-law, and it was the mother-in-law who went along with him and promised to help. The wife returned, Mike was on his knees every day for the first time and asked for forgiveness and listened to reproaches. He was sure that adultery, an impenetrable circumstance that prevented him from reconciling with his wife. Mike was a good-looking guy, and his wife always liked him very much. He made good money and was an up-and-coming professional. Mike decided that since he had been made to cry and beg, since he had already achieved reconciliation, he was owed sex. The colder and more contemptuous his wife became, the more Mike needed sex as proof that he meant something to her and was worth something. Otherwise, what was the point of working hard and trying? But it's not easy. At first his wife gave in, clenched her teeth, then began to scandalize, and once told him that she was sick of his odor. She cannot even smell him, so he became disgusting to her. Fortunately, Mike did not run to divorce after these cruel words and agreed to let it go. And so sex began to slowly return to Mike's family. At first, his wife warned him that her sudden initiative meant nothing. Probably she was afraid that the quarrels would not start again because of sex. But Mike stopped hitting on his wife on principle. He could kiss her and hug her, but he made it clear that he would not insist. He was increasingly calm, and his wife looked at him every now and then and waited for something. He saw that it was as important for a woman to satisfy her man as it was for him to be satisfied. And then the question became different. The wife herself began to want him. At first he thought it was a trick and a game. She moaned and trembled, and he could not believe that she was not doing it on purpose. She started having orgasms, and he realized that she hadn't had them before, even though she had enjoyed sex at the beginning of their relationship. He saw what a truly aroused woman was like, how determined she was, how her body heated up, how she lost her mind. All of this was a revelation to Mike. All of it amazed him. Between her confession that she didn't want to tolerate his scent to her saying that she sees him and drifts off so she can't wait for the baby to fall asleep and her knees trembling when he hugs her, it's only been 5 months. And Mike's voice became the sexiest, and all his mannerisms, even the manner of throwing a fork in the sink, for which his wife was ready to kill him, became pleasing and arousing to her. But the strangest thing for Mike was something else. He thought that his wife could not forgive him for cheating on her. She always claimed that, and he thought so too. But when their relationship improved and his wife's attraction to Mike returned, he suddenly noticed with amazement that she no longer cared. She no longer saw it as offensive, disgusting, or self-destructive. Her husband had slept with someone a few times and then dumped them to rebuild the family. So what? So what? Of course this girl is jealous of her. Of course she was in love with her husband. Of course he is very sexy, but he only loves his wife. She didn't want to repeat and didn't think it was possible, but the past didn't weigh her down. While the wife was disgusted with Mike and sex, she often described to him in colors how disgusted she was by his betrayal, how she was nauseated, how she was torn by the thought that he had touched someone else, how she was humiliated by the role of a deceived fool wife, how she hated him for it. Mike thought it was pretty disgusting himself and didn't understand how he could do such a thing. And here he continued to regret it, and his wife began to take it very lightly. She felt no humiliation, no disgust. She even found the girl quite pretty, but she became bored discussing her. And the husband? Why, he was a hot young man and he wanted sex. It suddenly made so much sense to her. There was so much tolerance for some reason. Mike was so amazed by this transformation. He realized how important it is not to listen or pay attention to what a person in a particular emotion is saying. But Meryl loves him. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. There are many more interesting stories ahead. Thank you.